podcast. I don't think you need an introduction, but regardless, I'll say welcome, Christopher Invidiata.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure. Yeah. Good to be here.
So, I do want to give a bit of your background, and I think most of you already know, but Christopher's past number one worldwide RE/MAX agent, and coming from Canada, that's a pretty big deal. We have the same population roughly as Florida, so to beat everyone in North America is something. And you're also number one in Canada 15 times with RE/MAX, so congratulations on your success.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's something no one can take from you, and it's something to be proud of.
Yeah.
So today we want to jump into all things real estate. We're going to touch on the market. We're going to touch on a little bit of your background. We want to find out what's happening in today's market, what you see is kind of coming down the pipe. And maybe we'll start with one thing that to me has always fascinated me. How do you stay in such great shape? So,
my kids bought me a Peloton for Christmas, and I use it probably about 5 days a week.
Okay, so you're the first person I've ever met that actually uses the Peloton.
Yeah.
Because I've been waiting for my friends to sell them on Kijiji to me at half the price.
Yeah.
Because they're sitting in the basement. So that's good to know. Good for you.
And some lightweights too.
Okay, good. Yeah, I've got to hit that stage of life. I'm not there yet, but I'm looking after 4 little ones. So get some time. Oh yeah, it sure does.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about the elephant in the room right now, which is the economy.
For sure.
It obviously, is all over the news. There's a lot of fear being injected into the news with regards to where we're headed, what's going to happen with real estate.
Sure.
Obviously real estate being most people's largest asset.
Sure.
What do you see currently, and what do you see happening in the, say, next 60 days?
Yeah, so I think rates were the big speed bump, for everybody. And, for good reason too. Rates were so low. And it caused the inflation, caused the panic buying.
Yeah.
So we actually need to see the rates go up in order to tame the market. So I applaud the government for doing that. I also think that the rates are actually low still historically, because you look back over time. In 81, they were 21%. In at the end of 09, they were 12%.
Right.
So the reality is we can afford to have rates go up, I think around 4, 5, 6%.
Okay, and we're getting close, right? Yeah. So 5-year fix is somewhere around 4.9 right now. Do you think that an aggressive increase from this point would be detrimental? Do you see it as still positive within a threshold?
I think raising them too quickly is a mistake. Okay. Personally, I think they need to do it gradually over time, because it sends a shockwave through the industry, which has happened now because the market has responded accordingly. Prices have been dropping. But the other big factor is immigration, which we've not seen for the last probably 2 years since COVID has been here.
Right.
So the minute immigration starts again, you're going to have a big demand again in the market.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with that. And so you touched on the 80s. Mm-hmm. I personally have been in real estate only through, I would say, an up market. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen major corrections outside of that blip, 2008, I suppose. Can you walk us through what happened in the 80s with regards to, we saw interest rates climb to 18%, I believe. Yeah. What was the luxury market like? What was the average price point market like? Were they different? Did one hold better than the other? And what do you think will happen moving forward in this economy?
Okay. So in 89, that was a big change. 88 was a boom year. 81 was a really bad year. So after the market had climbed to its peak, the rates went up and the market started to decline. That decline lasted for about 7 years, so it was continuously dropping. There's always upward pressure on the luxury market because people with money watch the economy. So if their businesses are not doing well, or in general, they're more conservative. So it does affect the high end for sure.
So let me drill in there. So when you say that the luxury market can be more conservative, have you found in your experience that, let's call it spade a spade, people with more money are better with money? Would you say that is generally true? And my second question to that is, would you say that they are more conservative than, say, the average price point in general?
There can be two types of thoughts there, because some of the people with money are opportunistic. So if they see the market starting to decline and they have money, they may decide to wait, which is, aggressive behavior. And then there's others with money who have come into it through inheritance, or they won it, or they sold their company and And they're not really that conservative. They're actually looking for a lifestyle change to reward themselves. So we get a bit of both.
In the last, I would say, 2 years, specifically since COVID kind of entered our landscape, we saw a lot of people moving outside of the cities into rural properties.
Yeah.
Cottage market went up, if not 50% more. Do you see some of those rural moves actually returning back to the city, or do you feel like there is still going to be that urban sprawl taking place moving forward? And I'm really talking over the next sort of, 1 to 6 months.
Yeah. What I've heard and learned is that a lot of the corporations now are calling their workers back to work because the inefficiencies of working from home, they know that people are more efficient at the office. Mm-hmm. So we're starting to see people that have moved out starting to come back into the offices. So there's a pullback to that. But I do believe that the growth for Ontario is going to be around these small towns. And if you look at adding even just 10% population around some of these small communities, which could support it, and using technology in order to communicate would be a win-win for everybody.
One thing, I think you know this already, but we become good friends and I have a lot of respect for you. And one thing I think that most people want to know is, what would Christopher Invidiata do with his own money right now? Yeah. Is your own money on the sidelines? Is your own money looking for opportunities, or are you going to wait until a lower plateau is hit? What are you doing with your own money right now?
You can never time the market. We've all learned that. You can wait for the bottom, and the bottom will keep eluding you. I think when you buy real estate, you buy for location, you buy for the long term. It's a 10-year cycle. So the reality is we've seen the rise and fall in the market. But I always say to myself, if you have good location, prime locations, it'll in 10 years, it'll always make you look good.
Right. And so do you speculate then that now is still a good time to get in because interest rates are relatively low, specifically compared to the 80s? Or would you say, you know what, I think I'd hold on and wait to see if better pricing becomes available over the next couple months? Are you a buy, sell, or hold style person with your own cash right now?
I would say, again, it depends on the property.
Okay.
Prime properties are hard to get. So if the opportunity is some key locations start to come up, then I'd be aggressive to get a hold of buy those.
If the right property came up, you're always a buyer.
Absolutely.
I got you. So you would say that you have more of a consistent style, looking for the right location, the right piece of land, the right building, the right house.
Sure.
At all times?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense to me.
Plus, if it's an investment and you have the income to support the debt, then to me it's like you buy and hold. You keep those good properties.
Right, and for those that maybe don't know in the audience, basically what you're talking about is if it cash flows, if it breaks even, if you're not actually losing money month over month,
for sure,
then anytime is a good time to buy because the investment is supporting itself.
Totally.
Yeah. Totally. Okay, that makes sense. Talk to me a little bit about some of the shifts that you have seen in real estate over your career, and I want to land on what type of a shift we're in right now, because there's a palatable shift. Everyone can kind of feel it. Yeah. And I'm not just talking about the economy, coming down price point wise in the last 2 months. I'm talking about brokerage models are changing, realtors are changing their style of advertising. What have you seen in your career as sort of the big shifts that kind of stick out in your mind? And what do you see happening in today's landscape?
Yeah, so great question. I think, first of all, the shift is due to the interest rates again. That's it's going to cause the market to go down. That's the intention. We actually do need that to happen. Prices need to come down a bit. But the reality is we need housing. Ontario could support 3.5 million new homes. The real demand is to start building new communities, start building housing for the demand that actually is there. So demand's not the problem. It's really the supply that's the problem, which goes back to saying if you find good real estate, you should be looking at acquiring it, especially now when rates, even if they go up 1 or 2%, the rates are still very effective, very affordable.
I've lovingly called you the father of real estate, and it's because I've followed you over your career. You have a very recognizable brand. I've watched you get into development. I've watched you get into residential, a little commercial. When you look at those three categories, I guess specifically, do you find that one of those categories slows or speeds up in I wouldn't say a recessionary time, but certainly a downward trending market? Or do you find that all three kind of trend downward around the same levels? Do you find developers slow down right now, or are they starting to pick up steam?
Developers now will be still looking to acquire land. Land is the benchmark of all real estate. So you'll find developers still aggressively looking for good sites, even now, because when they go to buy, they buy 20, 30 years out. Real big developers.
Right.
And they follow the transportation lines. So I was sitting in the office with Peter Gilgan this one day, and he opens up a map. He says, "Do you see this little town here?" I go, "No." He goes, "There will be that town there." I go, "How do you know that?" He goes, "Because we follow the transportation lines, which is a 50-year plan. So there will be a GO train here, there will be highway here." So
right.
I thought, wow, that's really cool.
You know what? That's really good advice. I appreciate that, and I'm sure some of the listeners will appreciate that as well.
Absolutely.
So then take developers and say that they're still aggressively always trying to look for land. Yeah. When you go into the residential market, family, the Smiths, the Johnsons, whoever they are they slowing down in looking for that fifth bedroom, looking for that master ensuite? They wanted that new school district. Is that family slowing down their hunt right now, or are they still actively looking?
No, they're actively looking. I've always said in the market, there's 70% is want and 30% is necessity. So necessity is always driving the market, even in the worst of times.
Do you find that the market slows down from the bottom up, or do you find, and I'm talking historically, do you find that the market slows down from the top down? So is it softer in the luxury price points when the market turns, or is it softer in the entry level price points? Or would you say that that's not a fair,
I think one fuels the other. I think the low end of the market or the mid market drives the upper end of the market because everything moves up. Okay. So when things are going to soften, it usually hits the mid market, which then affects the upper end of the market.
Okay. All right. So you would say that average detached homes, they tend to decline. Those buyers slow down, which eventually hits the luxury market, and even the entry level market tends to soften slightly.
It does. Exactly.
Okay. All right. That's fair. Yeah. And take me through the commercial side of things. So obviously through COVID, there would have been some really, I would say, suffering industries, industries that were closed down. I think about restaurants, for example. I think about the travel industry. Can you give us your insight on the commercial market and what that looked like over the last 2 years and what you think it'll look like over the next 1 to 6 months?
Yeah. Great question, because in commercial real estate, the peak of the market where everything is fully leased, everything is going great, you're getting very low cap rates. 3%, is producing good yields for the investor. When the economy starts to go down, you have vacancies. That's when, again, investors will come back into the market, assess historically where the rates were. If they're down, it's a good buying opportunity.
Right. So, and I think that's a good point to point out. Basically, what you're saying is that, and I don't want to use your words, or I want to speak for you. So correct me if you want to check. But essentially, developers are looking for land always. Yeah. Residential is still has needs and requirements. Like, for example, they've got that next child coming. They need more space. They've always wanted to move from an attached home, townhouse style to a detached, like the new school district. Those needs don't actually change, so it still fuels them. On the commercial side, I think the point that I liked that you mentioned was they're ultimately looking at cap rates. So it's very much a mathematical formula for them, as opposed to an emotional purchase or looking for a lifestyle change, for example.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
For sure.
And so do you find then that the cap rates are better in the city and sort of in the peripheral, so we're in the suburbs here in Oakville, but in Toronto and the immediate suburbs, or do you find then the cap rates are getting a little bit better towards, you go to London, Ontario, you go down to Grimsby, or where would you say you're seeing better cap rates right now?
Well, when you think of cap rates, you think of Young and Bloor. That's center ice. That's the lowest, the best real estate, the highest, price per square foot that you can get in the country. So as you migrate away from that, the cap rates will start to go up. So the returns are better for the investor as you start to move out. The risk, of course, is can you get them leased out? So as you start to go too far out, am I going to find a tenant? Is there a good economy here?
Right.
So you have to weigh those two things out.
Throughout your career, I've watched you go through many different economic changes, COVID being one of them. Certainly interest rate hikes being another. We've watched your brand thrive I've been watching it for the last 20 years, and I know that you've been in real estate longer than that even. What would you say has been one of the key successes for the Invidiata team specifically, and just for any agent in the market with regards to managing the ebbs and the flows, going with the shift as opposed to against it? What would be some of your success stories along the way?
I think one of the things that a lot of agents miss is the relationship that is being formed when you're servicing the client. Yes, you're selling a house, but the house has people, it has emotions, there's families, there's kids. And the more you focus on building the relationship with the client, no matter what the situation is, with the price, the economy going up or going down, if you're their trusted advisor and they believe in you, then no matter what you have to tell them, they're gonna still work with you, as opposed to you being focused only on the transaction. And then if they don't like what they're hearing, they'll look to somebody else.
Yeah, and I think that I would say that's been my experience with you, is you focus on people. Totally. And we've built a relationship, I think a very respected relationship, and I'm thankful for what you've done in our industry, and I'm thankful for the, I can call it a mentorship even. I think that in my career, I always looked to the people that were the large teams and the people doing a lot of real estate at the time. And very often you will find that those people are very guarded, they're very closed off. I found you to be very welcoming, very open arms. And I think that it's probably because you focus on people. Totally. And maybe just to switch gears a little bit, tell me a little bit about where that comes from. So give us a little bit of history, maybe something we don't know about you personally, or, where were you raised, or how did you fall in love with real estate as an industry?
Well, before real estate, I was in the fashion world. I was in the jewelry business, I was in the clothing business, both at the wholesale end of it. So I was selling to stores. And I realized, when the stores don't sell what you give them, they want you to take it back. So, and plus, there's a lot of travel. It's a very exciting industry to be in. And when my daughter was 9 months old, and she just started to walk, and I got a phone call from my wife, and she said, "Shay's just starting to walk again. I don't want to be in Edmonton with Fabio, selling clothing to Harry Rosen." So I went home to my dad and I said, he's a medical doctor. I said, "What do you think I should do?" And he goes, "Well, you love people, you're a good salesman. Why don't you try real estate?" So for me, it was a career choice to be with my family. And that was the pivotal point for me. And because I was so appreciative of my first deal, I took the clients to dinner. And over dinner, they said, "Oh, we had a great time with you. You're a really good realtor. We have a couple of friends that might be looking to buy or sell." I said, "Wonderful." So I got the referral from him, did a good job for those people, took them to dinner. Next thing you know, I'm going out a lot for dinners.
Right.
I realized I can't do this alone. Right. So I had built my business. My appreciation was really on thanking people properly and making them feel special. And building a relationship. Right. So I had more fun going out for dinners and enjoying myself. Yeah. And from that, we just continued having bigger fun.
And what I will say is it's authentic. And for me, that's what I think most people love about you. Certainly one of the things I love about you is that it comes from an authentic place. You showed me a couple of photos, and it got me to, I understand your heart. One of them was, you were dressed up as the straw man, handing out treats on Halloween to the little kids. Yeah. And I know you have one of the play homes in Oakville for the kids to come visit, and it's branded with your team. It was able for me to see a little bit of your heart, and I loved it. Oh, thank you. You mentioned family, and I think we would be remiss to not point out the fact that Shay, Caleb, that's your daughter and son. They've joined you in the business. And how is it to work with your kids in the business? Because some people, they love it. Some people say, you know what, don't ever do it. You seems to be working for you.
It's a blessing. You know, when they want to be here, it's great.
Right.
If you're trying to force your kids to work for you, it doesn't work.
Right.
So when they want to be here and they're enthusiastic and they take on, they actually lift us to the next level because they're servicing the new generation, which with technology, with the way they think, they invite a whole new level of thinking and new clients for us to service. So.
Yeah, and it's he doesn't get the glory on this particular podcast, but on the other side of this camera, Caleb, your son, creative genius, obviously very, very skilled in technology and advertising. And how has he complemented your business specifically?
Well, Caleb started, doing signage, doing photography for us, and really from the beginning, his ability to shoot the homes better than we were before, bring up that quality, more detail, just raise the bar up for us.
If you were to talk to an agent, I assume some of our listeners will be agents, some of them will be the consumer market, and to that agent who's entering into real estate, what would be the best advice you could give that person?
I think the reality is if you're looking at real estate to make money, it will disappoint you. If you're looking at real estate as a career, as a vocation, just like a doctor, lawyer, if you take the kind of the sales approach out and you replace that with that relationship, you're a doctor, you're a house doctor, you have a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of issues for peoples and families. And if your bedside manner is really, really strong and you show that care, you're going to enjoy your career no matter what comes at you and no matter what market comes at you. So
yeah, I love that. And when we mentioned the podcast, and talking about shifts, wasn't really a thing. I mean, you go back 5 years ago, I don't even know if podcasts were out and about, and now it's everything. And now it's creeping into the real estate industry. I think one of the reasons is it's such a good way to actually talk about the markets, let consumers know kind of what we're seeing on more of a broad scale. It's a better way to actually reach the audience. What would you say are some of the things that the consumer market consistently ask you? And you can even go back over your career, but what are some of the consistent things that they want to know from the who's who in luxury or the top agent in their market? What are some of the pointed questions you get asked?
Well, they really want to know how you're going to go about selling their home, like how you're going to market it, where your strengths are in that respect. And I've always said we treat our fellow competition as colleagues. So we invite our competing agents more as a colleague to help sell the property. And so we build a fraternity of agents that we all trust each other, we know each other, and we help each other in selling the properties that we have. So that's a big thing. Plus the other is, how do you present it? What's a unique way of showing off the property? And I remember back in the day when there was no color photography. So I started doing color.
Wow.
And then there was no night photography. I started doing night photography.
Wow.
So you're always looking at a way of presenting the property in a better light than we are now. And with technology, doing theming videos, showing the aspects of the home, being present for the videos themselves so people get to know who you are. Even though they don't know you, when they do meet you, I saw you in that video.
That's right.
So you become more, I'd say, accessible to the consumer.
Yeah, and certainly we've watched you do that through your career. So to the new agent then coming in, their options basically today would be go it on your own, join a team, try to find your own team. Out of those three directions, brand new agent, what would you recommend to the general audience?
Well, it's fun. It's a great question because I always felt there should be a mandatory apprenticeship for an agent, because when you're a doctor, there's an intern period. When you're a lawyer, there's an articling period. So I think for realtors, we'll probably get to that point in time where a new licensed agent will have to be under somebody's tutelage for probably a year as a mandatory requirement. Because there's a lot more that goes on that the consumer doesn't realize, and agents do know that there's a lot of things that they have to be concerned about. There's fraud, there's a lot of moving parts. So as a new agent, you don't know that. But working under somebody, you get to see that, you get to understand the language, the vocabulary. So I do believe mentorship is key. It could even be for 2 years. But so joining a team with mentorship programs is probably the smartest thing you can do as an agent.
Yeah, it's funny because we are seeing the industry trend that way without it being mandatory currently. I think there's several reasons for that, but I think one of them is mentorship. When you look at the, I would say, explosive growth of some of the big brands, certainly your team being one of them, you look in the Ontario landscape, outside of Ontario, across Canada, and specifically in the US, what you'll see is reputable brands aligning themselves. Brands are getting bigger, teams are getting larger. It's actually taken a direction where it was the brokerage and the brokerage brand that was really, really big, maybe 10 years ago. And now we're seeing sort of the team brands kind of take over. Can you explain to us what you think that shift is all about?
Well, the reality is the teams themselves are the product of the leader. So, and kudos to you too. Like you've done exceptionally well for a short period of time. And I've watched you as well, and I've admired your growth. So when people know that Scott Benson is the driver behind his company, they want to be associated with yourself, just like Invidiata. They want to know, how can I simulate myself to the brand? How can I replicate what I do in my service and the way I deliver that service to the consumer? So having a brand that in a team leader that can share their knowledge willfully with the people that join them, so that at the end of the day, you want your agents to act like Scott Benson. I want my agents to act like Christopher Invidiata in the field. And I always say to the consumers, to my clients, you're going to love, let's say, Maria Collison. She's better than me, right?
Yeah.
So, you uphold them, but you actually know that they have had proper training, proper mentorship. So you're comfortable, giving a new client to one of your more experienced agents, and that's how you grow your team.
Yeah, I love it. We are seeing more and more trends towards bigger brands actually aligning in a competitive space. And you mentioned our relationship just now. I have people ask me often, why would Benson team, Invidiata team, even jump on a podcast together? And I often find myself answering, because it was the right thing to do for our clients. It was the right thing to do for our agents. And quite frankly, it's just the right thing to do for the industry. We are better together than the sum of our individual parts. Absolutely. And I think that those people that see that clearly, we can offer our clients obviously more exposure. A relationship at the negotiation table is far better than a cold meeting.
Oh, for sure.
Coaching and training for our staff and agents across brands, where they're getting some of my insight, some of your insight, and some of others. What an unbelievable opportunity to help shape our industry. And so I think I'd like to finish with just a thank you. I've been very grateful for this podcast, number one, but certainly just the friendship and the alliance that we continue to grow. I hope that we continue to move our industry in the right direction. I hope that our consumers benefit greatly. I hope that our agents benefit greatly, and I hope the industry benefits greatly. Any last words before we wrap up today's podcast?
When we make each other better, the consumer wins.
Okay.
So when we share our secrets with each other, it only helps the end product, which is the service to the client.
I couldn't agree more. Thanks again, Christopher Invidiata. I know that your time's important, and so thank you for taking some time out of your day.
Pleasure.
And look forward to joining the next podcast with you.
Awesome.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.